very warm welcome to everyone, and special thanks to Economic Times ET for organizing this GCC event. I think this kind of reemphasizes the distance GCCs have covered over the last few decades in terms of starting from single function, single location, to much more complex organizations today, multi-location, following different talent models, trying to do various things. And that's going to be the topic of conversation today. And to discuss that, we've got a very experienced panel. We've got Deepak, Punit, Suhas, Vishal, and Sanjay, who've been at the center of a lot of these changes that have happened in the GCC space over the last few years. And they'll walk us through some of their experiences, what they expect in terms of changes going in the future. So we're going to talk about various aspects of operating model. But before we get to some specific questions from my side, I'll request the panelists to just maybe spend a little time walking us through their journey in terms of, how their operating model has evolved, especially during COVID, and, any specific changes that they see happening in terms of operating model in the near future. So Deepak, maybe if I can start with you.
Thank you, Gaurav, and it's a pleasure to be on this session. I think this is the right time. Everyone's coming back to the office, and this whole industry is built on 20 years of transparency and trust. So it's been a long journey. We are at a point now where this is truly an extended enterprise. But the reason for the success is the sustained high quality delivery that has happened across all dimensions. And in the last 2 years, we could prove the resilience in terms of working from home, managing complexity, working round the clock across the world, and just the sheer maturity of technology and operations that has happened in the last so many years. And the world is moving towards a very diversified portfolio of activities, which we'll talk about during the course of today. And I think the latest on this is all the emerging technologies and the product organization, the blockchain, the crypto platforms, the new payment methodologies, and how the GCCs are participating in the innovation and accelerated transformation agenda. And over a period of time, the boundaries between different functions are collapsing, and it is becoming a team-based agile model, leading to a very high-speed digital transformation and creating a business impact for the companies and for the organization and for all stakeholders, including clients. Gaurav, we couldn't hear you after that.
Sorry. Deepak, thank you so much for sharing your perspectives. If I can request Punit to go next.
Thanks, Gaurav. And like Deepak said, great to be out here. I think when we look at the GCCs, a couple of things which stand out to me, especially looking at the last 2 years. Number one is that the GCCs displayed a tremendous amount of agility and nimbleness in terms of how they stepped up and responded. And I think fundamentally, retaining this agility is going to be something interesting going forward, and something, Gaurav, maybe we can talk about later on. The other thing I think which has happened is, with a very narrow GCC-only lens, I think has been that the GCCs are, across their parent organizations, uniformly being recognized as being extremely core, critical, and therefore the visibility of the impact the GCCs have, not just in terms of services and solution delivery, but in terms of strategic impact they can have, is becoming much more spoken about right now. And the pace at which the GCCs are evolving towards that being a strategic and core part of the broader organization and not a remote service and solution delivery organization. That is also, that movement has started at different speeds in different organizations, but it has been happening. And it's very gratifying, Gaurav, to see, as the chair of the NASSCOM's GCC Council, I get to see this, that almost uniformly all organizations are saying that they are starting to move up the value chain and being more impactful. Back to you, Gaurav.
Sure. Thanks, Punit. No, I think I completely agree in terms of the number of conversations that happen now in terms of impact and value is far higher than ever before. Right? So, great. Sanjay, quick words from your side.
Sure, Gaurav, and thank you for having me in this panel discussion, and a big thanks to the ETH team as well to get us all together. And given our different stages of evolution as GCC organizations, there's a tremendous value in sharing and learning from each other in terms of our journeys, our unique perspectives, particularly as we continue to see the industry going up in the maturity curve, not just in terms of size, scale, and capabilities, but more importantly, the value generation that we are seeing today. And I just want to start with a quick introduction about Telstra and our operations in India, because most of our growth in our center happened during the pandemic phase in last 2 to 3 years. So just a quick background about Telstra. We are Australia's leading telecom and technology company with incredible brand and reputation, the best network in Australia, the largest market share and the 5G leadership. And in India, we set up our innovation and capability centers in 2019. This was to harness local talent, nurture new capabilities, and drive innovation with a vision to be an epicenter of talent and innovation that drives Telstra's digitally connected future. That has been the vision with which we have been operating in the last 3 years in India. And it's been a phenomenal journey for us in India as we scaled up to 3 futuristic innovation and capability centers in Bangalore, Pune, and Hyderabad with over 2,500 people working across a range of capabilities. That has given us a true significant competitive advantage. And these capabilities include software engineering, product network engineering, data analytics, automation, AI, digital content creation, and many more exciting areas. And then just to answer your specific questions on the operating model, we are on a very exciting journey with new ways of working under agile model, and with over 50% of our workforce globally across India, Australia, and other locations has transitioned to the new model. And what this new model has done is it has truly reshaped the way we function as an organization, with end-to-end ownership and accountability with groups and product owners on one hand, while the chapters are focused on developing people, domain skills, and technology capabilities, regardless of the location we are based in. So that's where we are in terms of our journey and our operating model in India.
Sure. No, thank you, Sanjay, and great to see the kind of journey that you've seen. In fact, I was recently chatting with someone, and we always associate pandemic babies with newborns, but I heard pandemic GCCs for the first time recently, especially for GCCs who kind of started in the last couple of years. We'll talk more about that. Suhas, any perspectives from you?
Yes, Gaurav, thanks a lot. Thanks for making me part of this very august audience here. Thank you very much. I have a different perspective because I come from a technology company that actually enables the so-called digital transformation and so on and so forth. But in the last 2 years, what we've seen as a technology delivery company, we've seen a tremendous change in the way GCCs have adopted to the pandemic issue. And it's been interesting for us because we had a ringside view and we're part of the entire journey and the process together, both from the enterprise solution perspective or the client solution perspective. We had to change everything, and our approach also changed drastically. The other aspect I can tell you, Gaurav, is we completely moved 2 years back from in-office to remote or work from home. And it is very difficult as a task to be a sales maker and communicate and talk to customers and be a part of their transformation journey. So it's been pretty exciting till now, and most of us are not getting back to office. What is going to be very, very critical is to make the changes in terms of how you're going to work in a hybrid mode or straight away work from home or maybe work from site, and then how you enable this digital technology transformation to make the stakeholder, which means the employee, really happy, productive, and be part of the journey.
Sure, no, Suhas, I think, and great points. In fact, part of the discussion today, later in the day, is also going to be just for the hybrid working model as well. So pretty much we'll touch on the topic that you just mentioned. Vishal, you have a interesting perspective, both from a product perspective that enables GCCs or global organizations, as well as you have your own GCC as well. So any inputs from you in terms of how your operating model has changed or is changing?
Thanks, Gaurav, and listen, privileged to be part of this panel. Thanks to ET as well. But again, I think as you rightly touched on, between Thomson Reuters having their own GCC and also kind of servicing a lot of the GCCs globally, but as well as my background being kind of from being as a CFO for our global operations centers in the past, and now kind of running the business which serves GCCs, I've had the opportunity to interact with quite a few of the GCC leaders, including some of this panel. And I feel, one of the things which I've seen dramatically shift from when I was a CFO 5 years ago to now being kind of, front and center with in kind of really understanding and kind of working through the strategies of various GCCs is that talent and kind of the way GCCs are looked at has differed significantly even before the pandemic, but more so for sure. And in terms of just our own GCC, as you reflected on, right, in terms of Thomson Reuters GCCs, I feel over the last 3 years, we've kind of increased the seniority of our talent. We may not have increased in numbers, and we actually will continue to grow and increase in numbers. But I think more importantly, I feel like the profile of the talent in the GCCs has dramatically increased in terms of seniority. We have a significant number of new VP level roles in the GCC, which are now, I think, again, just kind of shows the flavor of which direction GCCs are moving. And it's not just across TR, but also across other GCCs I work with, where there's a lot more decision making happening in the GCCs as opposed to the past. I feel like there's much more collaboration around the way forward, not just for the GCC, but for the entire organization, kind of stemming and incubating from the GCC in terms of innovation and the like, which is also a key topic on this for the agenda. And I feel end-to-end processes now are being owned by GCCs, right? As opposed to in the past where there was always bits and pieces of manual work or fairly, I would say, quote unquote grunt work being kind of done out of the GCCs. But now global process owners are those VPs who are being based out of GCCs, which is where I think the excitement is kind of stemming from. And this is where I feel like the importance and the relevance of GCC on the decision table, right, and the getting a seat on that table is becoming more and more pronounced over the last several years. And I feel like that trajectory is just going to keep moving up, which is what's very exciting for this community.
Yeah. No, Vishal, well said. In fact, just on one point that you talked about leadership roles, one of the research that we were doing recently, and some again insights that were coming out, is if you look at N-3 leadership levels globally, there is anywhere between 5 to 10% of talent which is either taking those roles from the GCC or has grown from the GCC and then gone global to take on those roles. So I think clearly that's one other area that's emerging as well. So Punit, if I can come to you with the first point or aspect of operating model, is the entire governance and how the GCCs are structured, right? So if you see earlier, they were single function directly reporting either to the CTO, CFO, COO, or any of the other functions that were there in the GCC, to today being matrix, following maybe a hub and spoke model in many cases. So how are you seeing these models evolve? And is there a particular model that's better than the other in your view? And the second part of the question saying, within these models, is there a way GCCs can drive more value?
Thanks, Gaurav. Let me step back a little bit. GCCs, I think, first and foremost, we really cannot paint all the GCCs with a single brush. I think the structure, the construct, what we're calling the whole operating model, and I'm saying operating model, I'm calling is that secret sauce which enables the GCCs to be successful, really. It varies by where you are on the evolution journey. It varies by industry. It varies by geography. It varies by the culture of the parent organization, right? But some of the trends which I'm seeing happen right now is, number one is that collaboration becoming more important means that it's less about the structures in the GCCs. You know, I remember 5-7 years ago, we used to talk about where is your solid line reporting and where is your dotted line reporting. Suddenly that doesn't matter anymore, because a good GCC leader and a good GCC is not going to let either of them, whichever extreme of that spectrum, that decision line, they won't allow that to reduce the impact the GCC can have. The second part I want to talk about is, yes, in addition to collaboration, we are seeing what Vishal just spoke about when he said the seat at the table. And when we talk seat at the table, right now it's become much more about voice at the table. I think an evolution in the operating model which has happened is the level of confidence backed by genuine capability and ability to deliver, to bring voice to that table. Because I think many GCCs in the maturity journey are finding that they are able to get a seat at the table, but they don't necessarily bring their voice to the table, and therefore the influencing ability to the table. I don't believe that there is one better model, Gaurav, in terms of, because if there was a better model, honestly, with the amount of brain power we have across the GCCs and the industry as a whole, we would have defined what it is, boxed it, put it into a framework. There would have been books written, papers written, and we all would be moving towards a common target. So that really isn't going to be happening. I think, yes, we should not be talking about scale. We need to talk about impact. We need to talk about value. One of the terms which we are using a lot within our firm, within Natwest Group, is outcomes. How do we look at business outcomes and not activities, and not even process outcomes, but what is the business outcome? And the day the junior most person in the GCC can understand which strategic business outcome his activities are contributing towards, that alignment leads to the GCCs being able to step up and deliver a much better and much more impactful outcome. But let's not forget, Gaurav, that that is a journey. And when you're on a journey, you will start with small pockets doing well, other pockets not being able to move forward. But in any such transformation, there is a tipping point. And I don't know where that number is. Is it at 30%? Some people say it's at 40%. But when you hit that tipping point, it becomes self-sustaining. And that's what is extremely crucial about the whole operating model which we have. So I personally believe that we need to only look at it through the impact and value lens, and that is going to differ by industry, by parent organization. And as long as we keep moving up that journey, aligned to the strategic outcomes, then we are going the right path, and that will take us to the right operating model. The operating model should be what we evolve to, not what I decide as a target for us at a starting point, because that sometimes could constrain in a changing macro environment.
Sure, Punit, I think very well said. And yeah, like you said, maybe there's no silver bullet, right, in terms of saying this is the operating model that we should have. I think it'll be driven by a lot of other things, including the organizational context. Any other views from any of the panelists? If somebody wants to just add to this, what Punit said.
I think I echo Punit's comments in terms of the evolution. I think it has become a truly global hub model, for lack of better words. And it has become a virtual format, which is, there's no difference between any city in any region versus where the parent organization is. And it has become a very matured, diversified microcosm of the firm. And in that microcosm of the firm, the GCCs are touching every part of the firm and truly integrated in terms of translating and being a part of the business strategy discussions and translating the business strategy to so-called execution strategy, whether it is emerging technologies, whether it is the design, and then the implementation and the final outcome and the impact in terms of the impact on the stakeholders, the customers, and bottom line and everything. So I think it's becoming very diversified, and it's no longer only about technology or operations. It's just every part of the firm that's being handled by the GCCs in a very integrated way round the clock, which provides its own strength to the model because then you're just covering the whole world.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. In fact, Deepak, on that note, let me come to you to the second change that we're seeing under GCC. Is that earlier it was a lot of basic activities and, like I said, single function, etc. But now it's getting a lot more specialized. And what started off as what we used to term, though not the right terminology, a lot of back office activities, let's say 3 decades ago, to today, if you see, there's a lot of innovation happening, R&D, there is front office activities, a lot of automation is being driven, AI, ML, etc. What kind of changes are you seeing being driven in the operating model because of that?
I think just to expand on what I said earlier, it's on the leading edge of the site. So, for example, let me just start with technology. So, in technology, whether we are talking of blockchain, we're talking of the Ethereum platforms, we're talking of multi-cloud strategy, we're talking of the global network architecture, we're talking of launching our own payment systems or whatever. So the cutting edge, all emerging technologies, AI, ML, robotics, everything is being done at the GCCs. When you look at operations, then there is nothing which is not being done, to put it simply. And then you look at new work in new areas. For example, all the work on HR services, all the work on legal work, all the work on managing the legal entity networks, the legal entity structures, managing the entire procure to pay process, whatever it is called, supplier services, everything in finance, like product control, finance control, valuation control, and engineering and R&D companies are 58% of the GCCs. And again, all kinds of work is being done. So the talent in India is the main value offering, because we have talent across all dimensions of all kinds of pursuits, whether it is risk, whether it is analytics, whether it is data, whether it is data lakes, whether it is credit decisioning. So all kinds of work is being shared by the GCCs with the global organization, including participating in running the firm and changing the firm and working as a responsibility center rather than a cost center or an arbitrage center, but being a responsibility center to co-share the totality of running the firm. And the boundaries between front office, middle office, and back office have blurred quite a lot. It's just that based on the structure and local business, whether GCCs perform any revenue generating activities or not depends on whether you have local business in the country or not. But otherwise, it's all about the non-front office organization broadly, and supporting the front office organization for research and analytics and non-revenue generating activities. But it's just a plethora of capabilities and everything that one can imagine with all PhDs and actuaries and accountants and MBAs and engineers and all kinds of qualifications. So I think the global talent that India is offering is the key for the future, so that we create talent which is truly global in nature in terms of managing stakeholders across the world.
Yeah. No, in fact, Deepak, you raise a very important point is, and there's always been a question about saying that is India getting saturated in terms of number of GCCs that are there, the talent availability. But what I hear you say that one of the big differentiators India offers as a country is diverse set of talent, right? Which can actually bring all of this together, which might or might not be available in some of the other locations as well. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Vishal, if I can extend that to you, while 80 to 90% of GCCs in India started with finance, or have got a large part of finance sitting, one of the adjacencies that we've seen GCCs get into recent areas is tax, right? And I know Thomson Reuters plays an active role in helping GCCs deliver tax services around the GCC. But what is that you're seeing in terms of any changes in terms of operating models for the tax function specifically?
Yes, yeah, no, listen, absolutely. And I'll actually further from where Deepak left off, right, in terms of just the talent. I think India is clearly kind of set itself apart in terms of the magnitude of talent and the quality of talent they have. But I think, to your point, Gaurav, you combine that with the right technology, and in this instance, I would say a lot of the technology now is kind of moving from just being a pure box to kind of almost assigned to give insights and analytics and the like. And so what we have is kind of what we call content enabled technology. So at the bedrock of everything, we have a lot of content for tax, for statutory reporting, for global trade, and then on top of that is a workflow. And I feel like that, if you think about tax as a function, right? Perfect example, statutory reporting, perfect example. If you think about in the past, right, you would have a mix of people across the globe doing part work around tax, like 20, 30 people in a company which is operating on, say, 70 countries. You'll have these European spokes and like 3 spokes in Europe, 5 spokes in Asia. You have, a few in North America, and all of them scattered around. And when they're doing that work in all of their different jurisdictions with a combination of in-house and consultants, there's not a lot of synergy you get, but not forget synergy and efficiency, which I think is absolutely core. But at the same time, a lot of that innovation in terms of how you're looking at different governments and why is it that Spain is doing something which is going to be soon followed in GCC or in kind of Asia, and like that's all kind of lost a little bit. And what we've seen when we've kind of worked with our clients who pretty much operate one center for tax, for example, and tax is a center of excellence, and pretty much manage their entire 50, 60 countries which they operate out of this one center with 4 or 5 specialized individuals doing that, leveraging technology. There's not only a lot of synergies that come through, but a lot of understanding of tax, which is considered typically as a black box, right? And there's a lot of that ability to manage and ability to kind of really adapt to that change which is coming across in the entire globe around this particular function. So I think, as I mentioned earlier in my opening remarks, like the whole end-to-end process, right, where you have like this tax COE head sitting out of the shared service center, having 4 or 5 people in their team, actually managing multiple jurisdictions, gives a lot of kind of I would say scale and ability to understand that function and also be able to report up into the board and into the CFO a lot better. So I think those are some of the things which I continue to see having a lot of impact, apart from what you said 3 decades ago, the efficiency around the back office kind of work, which is where this all started. So that's kind of my quick take on that, Gaurav.
Sure. Oh, great. And thanks, Vishal. Sanjay, if I can come to you after this, and you talked about work in the innovation space earlier. If you look at GCCs and if you look at the value or the impact journey, there is a ecosystem play, right? And that includes working with partners and startups. And while we know that's happening in pockets where, let's say, GCCs work with their global partners, or even with startups now, close to 5 to 10% of GCCs have active engagement with startups. It's not still, I would say very, very rampant, right? Or it's not happening a lot. What can GCCs do to leverage the ecosystem more from an operating model itself perspective?
Sure. And Gaurav, I feel this is an area which is rapidly evolving for all of us. And figuring out that right mix of organic in-house capability development versus the partner ecosystem plays quite an important role in achieving the balanced outcomes across customer experience, transformation, and productivity objectives. And at Telstra, we have a significant partner network in India with over 11,000 indirect workforce with about 14, 15 partners. And we strongly believe in leveraging that partner system. So on one hand, we collaborate with these large partners who have quite mature capabilities. And on the other hand, we also collaborate and learn from some of the brightest minds in the startup community, which is thriving over the recent years. And we actually have a dedicated team. The way we make it work is a team which works on the mission of optimizing the partner ecosystem in India. On one hand, this team works closely with the onshore functional leadership, and on the other hand, they work closely with the partners and the startups to ensure we get the best operational, commercial, and transformational value from these partners. And we also have developed an incubator with startups. We have over 120 actively listed startups who go through a rigorous process of shortlisting through curation, deep dive, showcasing POCs, and then onboarding. And this has given us an organization-wide platform to experiment and scale capabilities that have potential to address key challenges. And we also organize regular theme-based cross-industry hackathon events to tap into ever-growing talent and creativity in the technology space. And I believe GCCs can tremendously benefit by focusing their startup initiatives on clearly identified high-impact business problems or use cases. And by starting where there is a critical business need, we can all demonstrate value quickly by showing some quick wins that help company realize value, build credibility, very importantly, for the investment in the startups, and use that credibility to identify additional high-impact use cases to build that business momentum. And lastly, I think the exec sponsorship plays a huge role. Culture plays a significant role as well, and we have massive support from our execs with a strong commitment to build a culture of experimentation and innovation. And as a case in point, we are one of the very few telecom companies in India to develop a network and product engineering lab where we collaborate with a number of partners for device certification, 5G, and IoT use cases. To sum up the answer, it's a combination of exec sponsorship, commitment to building a culture of experimentation and innovation, as I mentioned earlier, and showing some early successes and gaining that confidence from there on.
Yeah. Sanjay, if I can extend and ask you one additional question on that. And in fact, just as recently as yesterday, I was interacting with somebody who looks at global risk, and I met him in context of the GCC in India. And typically working with startups is looked at working with a lot of risk, right? So how have you managed that conversation internally?
Yeah, so you're right, it is not an easy conversation to manage because there is an investment which goes into it. And more importantly, I think the stakeholders need to see value in those capabilities, which may not be as mature, right, as you start those conversations. But I think what really helped in our case, and I'm sure it would help everybody else as well, is the quick wins, right? The point that I was making earlier, maybe some of these investments you have to make on your own, right, without sticking it from the stakeholders. And importantly, addressing the burning platforms, right, addressing the key critical business needs. And once you start seeing that combination working and showing results, the confidence picks up in the organization as well.
Sure, great. Thanks, Sanjay. Punit, anything you want to add? Because I know you also work with the partner ecosystem quite actively.
It's one of the things which earlier GCCs, Gaurav, used to have was that the decisions around which partners to engage with and for what purpose was used to be held closer to the headquarters. Okay. So it's been a very welcome change to see that those kind of conversations are being enabled and actually being progressed in the GCCs. That's point one. But I want to take it back, Gaurav, to what I had said earlier. It's really about business impact. Mm-hmm. And it's not necessarily about, I want to demonstrate that I have got 4 fintech startups with whom I'm working. The interesting part about working with the ecosystem is that when you want to solve a business problem, it doesn't necessarily have to be a direct customer problem which you're trying to solve. As an example, when we are talking about talent and talent shortage today in India, and one of the asks which happens is how can we shrink the cycle time to onboard new talent? I mean, to select, test, certify, and onboard them in the shortest possible time. So we are working actually with multiple startups in that domain, trying to see how we can take things forward. Now, that is something which is within our remit. You can do small pilots, you can do test and learns, and when you can demonstrate a result, you of course plan it in a way that you can scale it up then. And we are starting to have conversations and looking at that what we are doing in the GCC, can that be taken globally and can that help us in everything which we do? So when we talk about the ecosystem engagement, we must remember that we have to think about it with that larger perspective in mind. That is it scalable? Can I take it globally or not? Because doing that suddenly makes that conversation, the difficult conversation that Sanjay was talking about, it brings a different perspective to it and helps a little bit, oil that conversation to go a little more smoothly.
No, and I think that's a great perspective because the moment it becomes global and you can scale it up, the level of interest also goes up significantly in the global ecosystem.
And then you have, they'll come back to you saying, okay, what else can you do? We have another thought. Can you guys also try it in parallel? It starts, as I said, building up to a self-sustaining model over a year or two or whatever.
Sure. So great. Thanks, Punit. Thanks, Vishal. Suhas, let me come to you and, one of the key questions that, in two contexts, right? One is given the talent situation right now. I think the moment you start a talent conversation, people start to talk about offer drops, attrition, hiring issues, etc., right? But a lot of this operating model change, right? We talked about moving to specialization, moving to working actively with partner ecosystem where you need different level of leadership, etc. Right? How do you see with some of these changes, including hybrid working, gig model coming in, impacting the operating model choices, and what kind of hiring and talent strategies do you see going forward?
Interesting one, Gaurav. So, what we see primarily from a change perspective is the talent part of the business.
Hey, Suhas, there is some disturbance. Can you
hear me now? Gaurav, can you hear me properly?
There is some disturbance that I'm able to hear. I don't know if it's just me.
I can hear you properly. Yeah.
Sure. So, Deepak, your views on the talent, given the talent situation, given the operating model changes, how do you see the talent and hiring strategy change going forward?
I think, first of all, I believe it's a very good scenario because people are getting to choose what they want to do. So, post the pandemic, people are making new choices in terms of what kind of work they want to do, which city they want to work in, what are the other responsibilities. And that, I think, will lead to more happiness in the world because people will really decide, what's their calling and what's their craft. And so I think that's a good thing. In the short run, it may lead to some churn, but I think it will be a healthy churn. And the market will continue to be very, very buoyant. And the right word is buoyant because the GCCs are growing rapidly. We have about 1/3 of the Fortune 500 companies in India and about 30% of the Fortune 2000. So that will continue to grow. And, the contribution overall to the GDP and revenue, all this is going to go multifold in the next few years. So this is going to be a new era of opportunity for everybody. And so the market will be hot and brutal, and it will remain so for the next few years. And we have to take it positively. And what that means is that we have to see how we can help people with role clarity, with role progression, with skill building, with choices in terms of cities and countries and the kind of work they want to do, and compensation and innovative ways of rewarding people, and trust and respect, and making structures that are more collaborative and flat, and reasonable flexibility based on the kind of business a company is in. And if we bundle all this and make it a very employee-centric culture in terms of decision making with tremendous flexibility and optimism and caution, then I think that is the way to go. Small things like people not taking offers, counter offers, dropping out, all those things in the grand scheme of the play are minor. And these things will perish over a period of time because at the end of the day, it's 35 years of working in a couple of levels which are shrinking. And people would understand that the happiness is not in just the levels or the optics or the money, but the happiness is in enjoying what you do. So I think everyone has a craft today, and people are now progressing towards multiple capabilities and crafts, and boundaries are blurring between operations and technology and this and that. And so I think this is extremely buoyant for the countries like ours, which have such an immense talent pool. So we should just encourage people, in my view, to make choices which make them most happy and productive in the long run, because India has 60% of India's population is below 35 years of age. And, so I think we have enough potential to not worry about the pipeline, throughput, etc., because high quality supply will always be more than the demand. So I see it very positively, and I think it will be a better world if people can learn to choose what they want to do rather than take what comes their way.
Sure. No, I think you give a great point, and the biggest part is, like you said, this will soon perish or this will soon go away. I think a lot of HR heads will find solace in that. But Suhas, I see you are back now. Can I bring this back to you? Any thoughts from your side?
Yes, I hope I'm quite clear now.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. I understand there was some audio issue. Apologies for that. What Deepak mentioned was absolutely right. And I think what's also happening is we've also seen talent not being a single specialty focus. What we've seen right now is requirements are changing, and it's not just because of the pandemic. Pandemic has changed the way you work to a certain extent. It's not the requirement of talent is increased. So, for example, I think close to a lot of the GCCs are part of the engineering service providers who are essentially into a lot of this engineering, automotive, aerospace domain, where the talent requirement at some point in time earlier was probably singular. You could be a 3D analysis guy, or you could be just a modeling person, but that's no more the case. And what's also kicking in, the new technologies that are enabling a few things, like, for example, AI, ML, methodologies, use of data science, use of virtual reality for that matter, either in product design or visualization, and so forth. I'm just sticking to the engineering side because that's a good example of telling you that you may not need to have only one piece of specialty. You'll probably be having a 360-degree view of either the component or the product that you're going to design. So I see that changing rapidly. And in today's generation, as Deepak said, yes, less than 35, they are more keen to adopt and change and would like to do what they want to do. It's very, very simple. That's coming out very clearly. And in fact, I can give you the example of Dell, where a lot of our sales makers are actually very, very junior. They are kind of interns who come out of the college and then get their specialty training within Dell, and then, of course, pursue their careers within Dell in different segments that are existing. So talent per se is not limited. The hunger to actually learn is also there very, very much. It's very strong compared to what it was earlier. And the other aspect that is changing this completely is the new generation, or I would say the current generation, or the millennial, is some generation that really thrives on innovation. And I think that is something which is very, very important and critical for us, given the fact that we're going to be a resource pool of everybody, right from engineers to accountants to legal aids and so on and so forth. So that's what I see.
Sure. No, Suhas, I think that's a great point, and goes back to something that you talked about talent earlier, that such a diverse set of skill sets available in India. I think we just have to find the right mix going forward. Vishal, if I can come to you, and we referred to this a little earlier, while obviously getting the right talent and grooming them, providing them the right set of trainings, etc., is important, and managing their careers. One of the key aspects is leadership, right? And leadership both at top level as well as middle management level. What we see is 2-3 things. One is people sometimes still are caught with FTE mindset versus the impact, like Punit said at the beginning, right? In terms of saying how large a team am I managing? And in certain cases, we find that they're not necessarily able to think forward and drive innovation. And now, especially during COVID, there was a lot of stress on middle managers because teams were distributed, work was distributed. So how to actually manage that in certain model. So how can GCCs and GCC leaders work on developing the next level of leaders who can drive the change going forward?
So that's a great question, and thankfully I've had the privilege of talking to a lot of the GCC leaders, some on this panel as well, and my learnings will be completely from them. So it's not something which I'm inventing, but I think some of the recent conversations I've had right with GCC leaders, I feel which has been very I've been very enthused by it because there's a lot of I would say ability or kind of willingness to be controversial, which I feel like was lacking in the past. Right, there's a lot of challenging the status quo, which I feel GCC leaders, even some of this panel, are kind of driving within the organization. And what I mean by that, right? So in the past, I would say, one GCC leader quoted this just a few days back. Is she was talking about how there's a finance transformation project 2028 in the organization. She's like, I just find that to be crazy because 6 years down the line, when that 2020 comes in, there'll be possibly the world will be a lot further than where we are. So I think what we were, my colleague and I were then discussing this internally, and we were like, there needs to be this while we have agile methodologies in implementation and product development, there should be an agile methodology in transformation. And kind of Punit and Sanjay touched on this a little bit, in terms of the fact that those quick wins, right, are very important. And I feel like that, to your point, GCC leaders, what I'd say is that ability to kind of challenge the status quo and kind of say, just because someone at the CIO level or the corporate level has said that there's a finance transformation agenda where we do some of these big, heavy things in over the next 6 years, 5 years, and that's our roadmap. That doesn't mean that everything else has stalled, right? Because then that would just kind of hinder the progress within the organization. And that's where I feel like GCC leaders need to kind of potentially step up and say, you know what, while you're doing this, let me do a quick burst on how do we kind of say, do a quick burst on, say, HR or kind of, payroll systems or tax or stat reporting or treasury while you have this big bang transformation approach going through. And the good news is that with APIs and the great connectivity between different systems and a whole ecosystem which has been kind of the flavor of the season now, there's a lot of ability to do that. And I think that's where I feel, my advice from all the GCC leaders I've spoken to, which are making a big bang change in their respective organizations, is to really kind of challenge the status quo and try to see how we can get quick wins while there's a big corporate agenda in place, right? And I think that's where I feel there's a lot of value that can be added.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Vishal. Yeah. Sanjay, any quick thoughts from your side? I'm being prompted by the team that we're approaching the timeline. So I have one more question after this, but any quick thoughts from you?
Yeah, sure. I'll make it quick. And from my end, I think making innovation and change agenda as your and your team's biggest priorities is the key, because people need to eat, sleep, breathe that if you have to really make a difference to that particular imperative. And I think culture again plays a big role in terms of giving psychological safety and psychological net to the leaders and teams to test and learn. And of course, leaders need to walk the talk as well by spending disproportionate time and playing a dominant role in driving that change agenda forward. And one thing which has worked really well for us is transparent and rigorous governance around transformation objectives also. And it helps in terms of maintaining the focus, driving accountability. And as I said, this has really, really worked for us in Telstra.
Sure. No, great point, Sanjay. I think just in terms of driving accountability and having the right set of governance. So there is a question from the audience, and this is specifically for Deepak and Punit. And location obviously is an important part of the entire operating model choice as well. So the question is, how is the choice of city for setting up operations in India evolving? Like, where are people setting up now versus what it was, or what is going into the thinking and decision making criteria?
Punit, you want to go?
Please, Deepak, sure, I can. Gaurav, just very quickly, my perspective on it is that, especially post-pandemic, with so many conversations around work from anywhere and work from home and all of that coming in, the first lens, when we look at India alone, it is an evolving situation, right? Recently, there was a survey of employees done, and 74% of the employees, this was broadly for the IT industry, they said that they would prefer to have an arrangement where work from home is a very integral part of it. But 73% of the employees also said that face-to-face interactions for collaboration is very important to succeed. So that dichotomy which is existing in these two numbers of that same survey is something which is going to resolve only by trying out things and experimenting over a period of time. So that's, as far as I'm concerned, we will evolve what location and whatever means. But more importantly, and I hope, Deepak, I'm not overstepping by including you as a part of that, more and more, we are seeing that the leaders of the India GCCs are getting global responsibilities and said it's no longer about India, but it's about globally, how do you deliver capability, solution, talent, and to the parent firm. And therefore, suddenly the field for playing in location becomes global. It's no longer limited to just India. Deepak, can I pass it on to you?
Yeah, thank you, Punit. See, I believe that social capital is very important, which means that it's important for people to come to the office and meet each other and help each other and learn from each other and learn to work in teams, because group brilliance is becoming more important than individual brilliance. And that can only happen in a proper way when we are in the office. So I believe that over a period of time, this would be fundamentally an in-office culture with adequate flexibility and distribution for people to see how it can give the best optimum results. But that's one. Two, in terms of cities, I think as Punit said, that we have these top 10 cities in India where there is a concentration of talent and opportunities. And it's also a lot driven by infrastructure in the long run. So people want good schools for children, good roads, good medical facilities, peer group to learn from, and different entertainment venues, and electricity and water and infrastructure. So there are many things that drive the young population to be very, very mobile within India. And that's one of India's strengths, that the young population is willing to work from any city in India. So right now, there is a bit of a good feel about the family, and definitely flexibility will help in more care of children and elderly. But I think in the longer run, it has to be a balance of the two. And no company is limited in thinking about which cities to operate in. But every company would want to have multiple centers across east, west, north, south, central, and so on, so that there is enough distance between the cities in which we operate.
Yeah. No, and great points, Deepak, Punit, and thank you for your perspectives on that. I hope whosoever asked the question got the answer. But I just wanted to wrap this up, and it's been a great hour chatting with Deepak, Punit, Vishal, Sanjay, Suhas with you, and understand your thinking and getting your insights in terms of the operating model changes. I think few things that I picked up. One is there is no right operating model. I think there's a lot that goes behind in terms of driving what works best for an organization. But to me, there are 2-3 things that are very, very important, is to keep whatever the operating model is, keep it agile, because I think that's going to be important going forward, rather than becoming large fat organizations who take time to move, because I think that's a USP that we have, given that it's still a nascent industry. And the second one is from a talent perspective, focus on the right set of talent, the right set of leaders who can think and drive more business impact rather than pure SLAs. I think as long as these 3-4 dimensions are kept in mind, I think the operating model choices will continue to evolve. But again, thank you so much for your time and your insights today. I love the conversation. I'm sure the audience enjoyed it as well. Thank you so much.